Hello lovely friends, how are you all doing today? I hope you're well. We're having yet another stormy day, although having said that, the sun is just trying to peek out there, so it's just lighting my head. I look like a floating bright head in a dark space. So it's not a day for gardening, it's not really a day for being outside, full stop. Great, let's have some more indoor time, some sewing time. And it seems like the perfect job for me at the moment, where I'm trying to alternate being sort of quite busy and physical and then sitting down and being more quiet. I've been rushing around this morning as it is, whizzing out to the post office, running some errands before the next batch of rain comes. Anyway, yes, so a bit of sewing, yay! Now, the project I was going to do with you today, I might show bits of it. It's actually a gift for someone, and that someone usually watches my videos, so I don't know whether I should do it. Maybe I'll do it and then just hold the... I don't know. But there is something else I can do before that. And, yeah, great, because I haven't done any machine sewing for ages. This time last year, I'd done all my cutting. This is going to be another video. I'd done all the cutting of my patches to start my patchwork. It's mostly Liberty patchwork, lavender bags. It was right at the end of February. I'd got everything ready, and then boom, beginning of March, I beg your pardon, everything went a bit pear-shaped because of anti-teapot dyeing and that just sort of taking over everything. So yeah, hardly any sewing at all, apart from, I think it was the end of May or June. I did have 3 commissions that I needed to do and to finish because I needed the cash. But otherwise, yeah, the machine has been tucked away for months and months and months on end, and I'm about to get back into sewing. I'll hopefully be sewing now every week. At least some sewing, so lavender bags and bunting and all that stuff again. Yay! So I thought, right, let's give the sewing machine a bit of a run out today. Give the sewing machine a bit of a run, give myself a bit of a run. When I haven't been on the machine for ages, I get a bit nervous. I don't know why. So yeah, I'm going to do a really, really simple project today. And one of the reasons for doing such a simple project, A, just so I can give the sewing machine a run, like I said, but B, because I know there's a load of you who have recently got sewing machines. I know some of you had sewing machines for Christmas. How fantastic. Some of you have sort of, during the various lockdowns and all that we've had, have dragged sewing machines out of attics and cupboards. You've inherited sewing machines, what have you, but you've been too scared to get on them yet. So I thought if we do a really, really simple project today, I mean, it's ridiculously simple. It's the sort of project you might give a 5 or 6 year old, under supervision of course, but it's the kind of thing that when you're about 5 or 6 and you're first going on a sewing machine, this is the sort of thing you might do. It is that simple. Straight lines. Yeah, and maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, 2 hems and 2 seams. That's pretty much it. Yay! But I thought while we do it, we can have a little bit of a look at our kit as well. Just a really, really little look, nothing in too much detail. Your machine will be different to mine. Excuse me. You'll have your own. Hopefully you've got a sewing machine manual. If it's brand new, you'll have a manual that has come with your machine. If it's not brand new, it's always worth looking online to see if you can download an old manual or even buy an old one. You know, people might put that sort of stuff on eBay. So we'll come to bits and pieces in a minute, but the project for today, actually I need to move a few bits and pieces. Hang on a second. Is it going to be one of those days? Okay, the project. Let's move stuff. You're where I normally want to put things. Often when I sew, if it's this time of year in the winter, I bring my sewing table over here, so I'm in the window because this is the end that I sew on. Get as much light as possible falling onto where I'm sewing. Obviously the machine has a light as well, but I just like the light to sew by. Later in the year, the machine, the table, and it goes back over that side of the room and I sew over there, but not in the winter. Right, a cushion cover. Yay, 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 so easy. Now, this is a cushion pad that I've had already, and I just had this material wrapped around it. It's been on my little Lloyd loom chair by the side of the bed for the longest time. There was a different cushion there that did have a proper cushion cover on it for ages. That ended up going somewhere else. But this one has been sat there just wrapped in material for about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's going to be such a quick job. Why haven't I got round to it? I just haven't. But it's the perfect job for getting round to today. So yes, bog standard cushion pad, you know, one of these hollow fibre ones. My fabric, which this light's going to be an issue now, isn't it? It's so bright. I've had to take my I can no longer see. I've had to take my curtain dressing out of my window dressing out of the window, because I've now got my first seeds on the window for seed starting. I might have to fix this in a minute. Maybe I'm over here. I can't sit over here. Maybe I can just shade the top section of window. But look, I've got my fabric. Now this fabric is quite faded. I'm going to have to put a shade up, aren't I? Otherwise we're not going to be able to see a thing. Hang on a tick. Right, hopefully that will work. It's going to be too dark. It doesn't matter. Look, okay, so I've got my fabric here. Some lovely Cath Kidston. Now, this fabric is really, really wide. It's, hang on, approximately, nose to tip of fingers is, as my nan would have said, a yard, near enough a metre. And that, it's going to be about 1.70 metre wide. It's really, really wide fabric. Most sort of these cottons, these quilting weight cottons that you buy, they won't be this wide. So, right, I need to try and explain this. Because this is so wide, I'm going to cut a piece of fabric across the width of it. So this would be great if you're using a fabric that has a pattern that's got very much an up and down. Right, let me try and explain this. I'll explain it properly now. So, size of cushion. I want one length of fabric that's slightly deeper than the cushion to allow for a seam up here and a seam here. So about the depth of the cushion, and I want it 2.5 times the width. Because what I'm going to end up with is a long piece of fabric, short but long, and then this excess here is going to come around the back, and this excess is going to come around the back, and we're going to end up with a sort of a little, like an envelope opening at the back. So, because this fabric is nice and wide, I can cut that long strip out sideways. You might not have enough fabric to do it widthways. You might have to be cutting your fabric lengthways. So when you turn that length on its side, the pattern may not work. You could do it so that you keep it lengthways and turn the fabric up and under, and from the top down and over, so your pocket is sideways on rather than lengthways on. But that would mean that that fabric, as it comes up and under, it'll be upside down on the back. I mean, it doesn't really matter that much because you're going to have the opening on the back anyway, so excuse me, you wouldn't be displaying the cushion that way around anyway, but it would just annoy me if the fabric was going the wrong way. So this is great for a patterned fabric where the pattern doesn't have an up, a down, it doesn't have a specific orientation. So there are no like sort of strong characters like my duvet cover with the parrot on it, that wouldn't work. So a nice little floral ditzy print like this one, you know, a very typical Cath Kidston print where it's just a splash of flowers all over. I could look at that way, I could look at it that way, I could look at it that way. You get the point. So if you have got a bit of fabric lying around, a scrap, just turn it all the different ways and think, does it matter which way it goes? Does it have a front and a back? I mean, an up and a down? Now, the reason we're going to make it with an envelope opening is because it's really, really, really easy for a first time sewing machine sewer. I actually quite like, I would normally like to put a zip in my cushions. Most of them, I know, I've got an example here. So this one burst, I didn't use it, this good example, I didn't use enough fabric. Normally, can I be bothered to go and get one? No. I'd like to put a zip in. And if I do a zip, I'd like to do it in one of the edges, so it's concealed almost. So then I've got a front, and then the other side is also a front. I can use it either way. Then you could make it reversible. You could use one fabric one side, another. We're not doing that. We're not going to set a zip in, because setting a zip in is a little bit tricky. Don't be scared of ever getting around to trying. You know, do try. A cushion's the perfect thing to try on first time rather than a garment, you know, an item of clothing. Especially, you know, zips in trousers or skirts, there's sometimes there's a bit of shaping going towards the waist, which can make it more tricky. So yeah, don't be afraid of having a go at zips at some point. But if it's your first ever attempt at using a machine, don't try and use the zip. Don't try and do a zip at the moment. We'll just do an envelope closing. So that's what these cushions have got. These cushions, so they've got a little bit of piping around the edge as well, just to make them a little bit more swanky. However, I didn't have enough fabric to make a really deep, this is where the opening is. Ideally what I should do with this, because it's popping, is put a couple of buttons in it, but I didn't use enough fabric to properly overlap. So you see it gapes a little bit there, so you can see the actual cushion. Nobody knows because they only see it from that side. So to make sure I've got enough of an overlap for this one, I'm going to measure once, twice and half again for my length that's going to come all the way around, or if you're doing it that way. So with the depth, it'll be the depth of the cushion plus a centimetre at the top and a centimetre at the bottom for my seam allowance, and then 1, 2.5 times the width for going all the way around and making that little flapping over sort of envelope closure. So I'll get on and cut that out in a second. Now, what else am I going to need? I've got my threads out. So I've got different types of threads. Again, don't get too hung up on the colours. Gorgeous, aren't they? Don't get too hung up. I've got, these are really good threads. These are what I use for, mostly for top stitching. So when I'm making the bunting, when I stitch all the little flags into the webbing, I use this. It's really strong, but also quite, there's this silkiness to it, so it really kind of slips through that quite tough webbing. I use really strong webbing, slips through it nicely. And then I also, again, really, I don't want to tip it up too much, but really good selection of colours. You can see that I sew with colour a lot, can't you? These I often use because these are really expensive. These are a bit less expensive. I use these on, say, the inside seams. Where it's a colour that's not going to show, I can just pick pretty much any old colour. But I use it for seams which aren't going to get too much sort of wear and tear. So again, the insides of the buntings, because once the flag is made, turned inside out, pressed, those seams are never going to get any wear. They're never going to be pulled. So for instance, if it was clothing, especially say around the seat of your pants, where there's I don't know about you, but on the seat of my pants there's a lot of pressure there, I'd want to probably use a stronger thread. With the cushion cover, certainly this one that I'm just making for myself, it doesn't get a lot of wear. It's on the back of that chair. It's just, you know, snuggle into from time to time. So one of my slightly cheaper threads will be fine. The other cushion cover that I'm making, that's going to be a gift, I'll be using my expensive threads. So not all of the stitching, just thought, some of the stitching for this is going to be on the inside, some of it will show. So where the stitching on the outside is going to show, I'll just go through all my threads and find, I could either find the nearest match, this is not going to work in this light, anyway, I could find a thread that is, you know, a near match, so that the thread sort of disappears, you don't see it, or I could purposely go for a contrasting thread. See, that's quite nice, isn't it? Picks up the colour of the flowers. When we actually start sewing, I'm going to tip the camera down again, and hopefully the light we won't be so bleached out, it'll be more even light. So I might go for the contrast just because it's a bit of fun on the back. I would say, though, for a total beginner, go for one in as near the same colour as possible, because you'll almost certainly be a little tiny bit wobbly to start with your straight lines. You know what, I probably will be, because it's been so long since I did any sewing, certainly since I did any top stitching. So that's my threads. The other thing that I'm going to need is, I might need two. I've got some here, there's some tucked in the corner there. There are my, they're going to fall out. There's some bobbins. You can see that that's the last thing I was sewing was buntings, and you can see the colours I was doing. One lot was in purple, another lot was in pink. So you'll need your bobbins. I may need to wind another bobbin on with a colour that's certainly for the gift pillow. We may do that together today as well. So I've got bobbins, I've got empty bobbins in here. Yeah, there's empty bobbins in there that I can, if I want to spool on a completely different colour, great. The good thing about doing something like this little cushion for myself today is, if I've got a bobbin, let's say I've got a bobbin with not a huge amount of thread left on it. Let me show you, there's only a little, you get a sense of how much is left on that. So there's not a huge amount left on there, but that would be enough to do one seam. It's quite a strong colour. Maybe I wouldn't use that colour for something else. Use it for something like this project where it's going to be on the inside, no one's ever going to see it, apart from me when I wash it. But actually, even when I wash it, I don't really turn it inside out. So yeah, there we go. Bobbins, use up random bits of thread. That's my thread keeper. Now, on the sewing machine at the moment, if you've just got a new sewing machine as well, you will have probably got a number of different feet. This is one of my feet. This foot is specifically, so again, once we get going, I'll try and get the camera really close on this as I sew. But this is just for over sewing. Once I've cut the fabric, I'll end up with what we call a raw edge, which, as you can see, because I washed this fabric at the weekend. Whoopla. So I washed the fabric, and can you see that edge? That's what I call a raw edge. Can you see how it's starting to sort of fray and the threads are coming apart? So with this little foot, I can change it for the one that's currently on my sewing machine, which is my main sewing foot. I'll change it for this one, just so I can edge, just so I can put a stitch along the edge here. It just kind of doesn't quite bind it, but it just stops it from fraying anymore. So have a look through your feet that you've got with your lovely new sewing machine. If you didn't get one of these edging feet, you can do it with an ordinary foot, but you just do a zigzag by eye. We'll have a look at that too. Now the other thing, I'm going to change my needle today. Which size do I want? So I want to go for, I'm going to put a new needle in, because that needle hasn't been changed for ages. So I'm going to go for quite a fine needle, and I've got a number 14. That's nice for this sort of quilting weight of cotton. I've got larger needles. This needle, this is a 16. That I will use for when I'm stitching into the webbing with the bunting, because it's quite, it's a bit tougher. When I take the current needle out of my machine, I'm going to save it though. It's getting a little bit blunt. I could feel that on my last project last year, and said to myself, which is why I've got new packets of needles. Bought those last summer. I'll take it out, but I won't discard it. It will go in here. There's already one in here. This is my paper sewing needle. It's just in an old, it's oh la la, the light looks bleaching everything. It's a little cocoa nibs pot. That adorable little metal tin. Yeah, because it's a little, it did feel a little tiny bit like it's getting blunt for fabric. That's fine. It will work great for stitching paper. The one that's currently in here is the one I've been using for ages for stitching paper. I always keep it separate because paper really does blunt the needle much more quickly than fabric. So I'll swap out my needles. So I've got my new needle ready. I've got a separate foot, a special foot ready. I've got my threads to make my selection from. I've got some bobbins already wound, but I might think about winding another one. So the next thing to do is for me to get this fabric cut, get the sewing machine up on the table, and we can start sewing. And literally, once we start, hopefully we'll be done in about 10 minutes. Time for lunch. Yay! Right, see you back here with the fabric once it's cut, and hopefully this light will play a bit nicer with us. Oh my goodness, the light is so awkward today. Let's try and carry on anyway with a change of position. I'm going to bring you in much, much closer in about a few seconds. Right, so that's my fabric cut. So you can get an idea of my head is the cushion. I'm going to wrap it round. Okay, so I've got my fabric cut. Let's get the sewing machine up on the table, and now all my stuff's over there in the window. I'll swap the foot, show you how to swap your foot. Okay, well, I've moved slightly again. Let me just see if let's just bring you in a little bit closer. Let's zoom in a little bit. Oh, wrong way. Hopefully. Okay, oh, just perfect, pretty much. This is probably why I don't do much by way of sewing videos. I'm so jealous of Kate at Last Homely House because her sewing room is such beautiful light. I mean, obviously it's full of windows, it's gorgeous. And she's got that lovely big table. She's got the space. I don't have any space or the proper light here. Anyway, we're here today, so let's plough on. Now, first things first, I want to change out this needle. I've got my, I have to remember I'm in close-up now, so I have to show you everything closer. So I've got my new needles. When you buy a packet of, let me show you how it is. When you buy a packet of needle, I can't, let me just zoom you out again really quickly, because otherwise I don't know where the camera is. So when you buy a packet of needles, again, I'm talking about everything as if you're a complete and utter novice. For those of you who are more experienced, please turn away now because you know what you're doing. A packet of needles comes like this. The back section is like a little clear cover, pushes up like that, so you can access your needles. And then this little section at the top will usually bend away a little bit, so you can get to your needles. So I'm going to have a lovely new needle out, ready. Now, when you look at the needle, is this going to pick up? Oh yeah, I'll show you with the sewing machine in the background. You'll see that there's there it goes in the light. One side is completely flat and the rest is round. That flat side, let's pick it up in the light again. There we go. Oh, there's the flat side again. That flat side is going to face me in the machine. Let's have it here and ready. Hoopla. Now, the needle at the moment, it's down a bit, so I'm going to just wind up the hand wheel, bring the needle right up again. Oh, actually, when it's down, let me show it to you when it's down. Let me zoom in again. You see in the down position, can you see this little black thing here? This is a screw. This is the screw that holds the needle in place. So I'm going to unscrew that and it'll drop the needle out. But I want to do that in the up position because I don't want to lose the needle down here. So we just turn it up into its up position. So I'm going to get hold of my old needle. That's going to be just only like 1 or 2 turns. Out comes my old needle. There we go. Flat. Oh, I beg your pardon. It's flat side to the back. I've just checked on my own needle as it came out. Flat side to the back. Now this one is going to become a paper sewing needle. It can go in that pot. New needle. Flat side backwards. Oh, fiddles. Up into its little cavity and then tighten my screw again. So I'll show you if I bring it down. See, there's my screw, isn't it? So it just slots up into here. You can feel it as you pop it in, it will only go so far. Okay, that's the needle changed. Good. Now I want to swap my foot out and I'll show you. I'm just going to swing it around to the back. Sorry, I just royally whacked the camera. Right, now I want to change, this is my regular sewing foot and I want to put my over sewing foot on. So when you look at your foot close up, you see in the middle there's a little silver bar in the middle. That's what's going to go up into the mechanism here and be sort of caught on. So I'm just going to press the, let me show you around the back. See this little red button, and press that and you see it just released my regular sewing foot. So now it's always a bit of a fiddle and a faff finding where that little bar is. Oh, I have become decidedly more cat-handed as I've got older. I need to prep. Oh, I need 2 pairs of hands. Have I taken you completely out of shot now? I need to press my red button back in at the same time as lifting my foot up. There we go. So I've lifted it into position, the red button's pressed in, let go of the red button, that's now gripping. So I've got my new foot on and this is the one I'm going to use for over sewing. So I've got my needle in, I've got my new foot on, I've got a bobbin in there. I need to just thread my thread, which I won't show you because again our machines will be different, but I will show you how to pick up the bobbin because at the oh no, it's already picked up. Your instruction manual should show you that anyway. And then we can actually start doing some sewing, so come on, crack on. Right, well we're finally ready to do a bit of sewing. So I've got my length of fabric. Now this was the side of the fabric. This is what's called a selve edge. This is nice and neat, won't need anything doing to it. This is how it's manufactured, this is how it's come off the loom. The cut edges, scruffy one there, that's going to become, we're going to make a hem for that. These edges are what's going to be, the long edge is going to be the seams. So I just want to stop that edge from fraying by over sewing it. Now, I showed you that foot I put on earlier. I'm now threaded up, the bobbin's up, and there's a little, on the edge of this foot, there's just a tiny little guide and it shows me where to thread my fabric in. I've got a zigzag stitch selected, I've selected my stitch length and my tension. These are things which your manual should cover for various different types of stitching. You want to change your length, tension and all that. But honestly, don't get too worried about these things. Like I said, if you don't have this foot, you could whip this along by hand if you wanted, or just do a zigzag stitch and stay close to the edge. I've got my foot, so I'm going to use it. It just makes life a little bit simpler. So let's crack on and do. say I'm sitting wonky to make room for the blooming tripod to fit in. Anyway, you get the idea. I'm just going to go along this whole raw edge here, just over sew it to neaten it and to stop it from fraying. You don't need to see me do the rest of that, so I'm going to move you out of the way so I can do the rest of it at the right angle. Okay, so now my two long edges are nice and neatly just kind of sewn over, bound over. So onto the short edges. Now, these are going to show on the outside of the cushion. These edges won't, they'll be sewn onto the inside. But before we get to there, let's make some nice hems on these short edges. So what I'm going to do, so that's the right side, as in that's the side that's going to be the outside of the cushion. And then the wrong side, you'll always hear in sewing people talking about the right side and the wrong side. So if you're following a pattern, they'll mention the right side or the wrong side. The right side is simply the side that you want to see on the outside. So right side, wrong side. So very simply, all I'm going to do is fold on the inside, the wrong side. I'm going to fold down once like that, and then so that's where the raw edges are. Can you see the tatty raw edges? And then I'm going to fold again. So you see now it's all neat on the inside, neat on the outside, and that's going to be where my hem is. I'm going to stitch, but before I do that, I'm going to do those two folds. I'm going to press them so I've got a nice neat finish. So I've just got the ironing board out. I need to go and get my iron on. Okay, so I'm going to sew my little hem that I've just turned, which means I'm going to swap out the foot again. I don't need the over sewing foot. I want to go back to now my absolute bog standard sewing foot. Oh, it's getting hooly again out there. It really has been a wild few days. I keep sounding puffed after a take and I come back. It's because I keep having to move so much stuff around to get each shot. And the iron and the sewing machine are sharing the same power socket. So I have to go wading through stuff, plug this back in. Right, now I'm actually going to sew this. This is the wrong side, it's the inside as opposed to the right side, the outside. I'm actually going to sew it on the wrong side. I sort of want to, I don't know, I thought it might make it easier to see. No, let's do it properly. No, I'm going to do it this, I haven't pinned it, I'm just going to get on with it and just get sewing. Also, remember to change your stitch from a zigzag to a straight stitch again. My stitch length is fine, that tension is fine. Let's just get this little hem done and dusted. Dead straightforward. This is what I mean about this being such an incredibly ridiculously simple and quick. It would be really quick if I wasn't stopping to talk and demonstrate. A super quick little cushion cover to make, because if you didn't bother over sewing those edges even, you're literally going to do the hem here, the hem at the other end, sandwich it all together to make a couple of seams. Oh, that tension feels quite high still. So I've kept the white side. This is now the right side. The bobbin was white, so it doesn't show. You can see on that side now where my burgundy stitches are from. I haven't even bothered changing the thread, like I said, because this is for me and it's just a bit of a scrappy quick fix, and it's also a sort of an outing for me on my sewing machine again after not being on my sewing machine for ages. I'm not bothered. When I come in a minute after this is all done, oh la la, I'm going to move on to the gift one, the gift I'm making. Then I will be swapping my threads for all the fancy ones, etc, etc, and taking quite a bit more care as well. I think this is a nice one to start with if you're getting to know a new sewing machine. I mean, what we learned today, hopefully, you know, how to change the needle. You probably won't need to do that yet because it's a brand new machine and you've not really used your needles much. But yeah, how to change a needle, how to change a foot. It's kind of useful to know those things. Yeah, my tension is wrong. I'm going to have to, I can feel that as I'm pulling at my threads. I'm not happy with the tension. I'll play with that in a minute. So, there we go. We've got a couple of nice, neat hems. Now, we're going to fold the whole thing. This is going to be, need to push you further back. So it's a bit unceremonious today, isn't it? So this is the right side. This is the side that's going to show. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it around like this. I'm going to do this on the flat in a second. So that side comes in, and then this side is going to come in and over. So you see how we've got this, that's going to be the opening. I need to do this, I need to measure this across so it's the right, it's going to be 45 centimetres. So I sort of find a midpoint and then mark up 45 centimetres. And then I'm very simply going to stitch a seam across this whole thing. So let me get this measured out properly, then we can get it stitching, and then we can turn it inside out and put it on the cushion and be done. Yay! We're very nearly done. So I have now made my sandwich. You can see there's one of my little hems I made. The other one is inside. It's in there. So I've folded it around. It's basically that cushion was 45 centimetres square. So this is now 45 centimetres. So it's time for me to run some stitches along here to make a seam. So we've made 2 hems today and we're going to do 2 seams. Just a quick word on seams. If you remember when I was talking about cutting this out, I talked about cutting extra. So although I wanted 45 centimetres, I mentioned I'm going to allow a centimetre at the top and the bottom for seam allowance. On the foot plate, your foot plate will have markings. Mine is in both inches and centimetres. It's in imperial and in metric. So there's a marker here. I know which marker represents 1 centimetre. So I'm going to follow that with the outer edge of my fabric. My outer edge of fabric is going to touch that line, and that means the needle is inside the fabric by 1 centimetre. So that's my seam allowance. If you're following a pattern, when you start to get into using your first patterns, a pattern will always say, for when you come to actually cutting out, laying the pattern on your fabric and getting to the stage of cutting out, it should always say whether the pattern allows for a seam allowance. In other words, when you cut it out, you're cutting it bigger than it's going to be eventually, because some of that fabric you're cutting out is going to be taken up with the seams. And if it doesn't give a seam allowance, sometimes, you know, if you're using a book, a pattern from a crafting book, it might give you a template for a pattern, but it might say does not include seam allowance, or it'll say sort of, you know, add 1 centimetre extra for seam allowance, etc. So yeah, when you're cutting, just before you cut, you know the old adage, measure twice, cut once. Just check whether your pattern has a seam allowance, and if it does, yay, brilliant, get on with cutting. If it doesn't have a seam allowance, you need to work out what sort of seam allowance you want to give. So I gave this 1 centimetre either side, and now I can just snuggle it up to where my line shows that I'm at 1 centimetre and get sewing. Oh, I need my pin. I've put a few pins in it, so I need, this is what I mean about there's stuff everywhere in this place. You know, when I move, I love the idea of having a separate sleeping room and living room. Sleeping room, also known as a bedroom. I want a spare sleeping room. No, I don't want a spare sleeping room. I'd like a separate sleeping room. And hopefully it will be big enough so that I can have my bed in it, but also on one side of the room have a sort of dedicated sewing space. So a bigger table so I can cut, make it easier for cutting, a bigger table, and I can have my ironing board and iron out sort of full time. I don't have to keep putting things away and moving around things. Anyway, that's my fantasy. And then the living room can be for everything else. So all my shop stuff that I do that's not sewing can be in the living room. Anyway, yeah. Dreams, fantasies, get sewing. I could sew over my pins. It will usually sort of slip over, but I'm on quite a short stitch and I'm paranoid because in the past I have had an occasion where I went to sew over a pin and maybe I was just going too fast, I don't know. Anyway, it hit the pin, it's the sewing machine needle split the pin in half, threw it up and one half went pinged into my face. Not my eye, but into my face. And I don't know. It was enough to make me paranoid forever and a day. So I always take my pins out now. So we're nearly done with this seam. And we'll flip it over and do the other side. And then it's done. It is a really simple kind of cheats cushion cover or great introduction cushion cover if you've never sewed before. And like I said, I'm when I finish this, I'm going to get on this afternoon and make the gift one, but I'm going to embellish it and do other things with it and make it, it's going to take me a bit more time than this one. Right, let me get this other edge done and then let's have a look at the finished product. Okay, Rick. Those little seams are done. Time to turn it inside out. Turn it the right way. Oh, I missed a couple of ends snipping. I would have tried to have caught those the other side, but obviously I didn't. No issue. Which way? Oh. I thought for a minute I'd sewn the wrong side out to the wrong side. Poking my corners out with my finger. Now, if I was being, you know, a proper good sewer, I would press this whole thing again. But I ain't gonna. It's just for me. It doesn't matter that much. So, I now have... Oh, do I want to press it? I think I might do. But anyway, look, that's the front, that is the back, and you can see that's the flap. So let me get this cushion tucked into it. Now, like I said, I know this seems to have taken ages, but that's because of stopping to talk, talking about a load of stuff before we actually got sewing. But honestly, this is what, 10, 15, well, let's say at most it's a half-hour project for measuring, cutting, you know, doing your initial measurement and cut. Taking your time as you gain your confidence. Nice little cushion for my little chair over there. And because I gave it plenty, unlike the ones that are in the window, it's not gaping at the back. This is quite a skinny pillow, skinny cushion. So even if I had a really, really, really plump cushion in there, there's enough fabric overlap that I won't get that horrible gaping that I've got with the window ones. I think it could do with a plumper pad at some point. But yeah, there we go. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, perfect little cushion cover to be done half an hour or less, probably less for any experienced sewers, but hopefully experienced sewers aren't watching because they'll be looking going, what? But for any of you who are total beginners, maybe half an hour to make your very, very, very first thing with your sewing machine. Yay! And start to build your confidence. So you know, what have we done today? We've learned how to change the needle, we've learned how to change the foot, that's great. We've changed our stitch from a straight stitch to a zigzag stitch, brilliant. We've learned how to make a hem on a machine. If you're doing a hem on a dress or skirt or trousers on something you would wear, I would almost always hand hem for those things, unless I'm in a real hurry, then machine hem. But we've done hems, we've done seams, we've talked a little bit about seam allowance and patterns and looking out for it. So hopefully that's some good little bits of info for anyone who's just starting out. Should we put it where it's going to have its home? Yeah, let's do it. Pop it over there. I think the bottom one needs a bit of a fluff up too. Pop that one back in its place. Actually, this is getting pretty ancient now as well. It's got a mark on it. I don't know what from. I can't get it out. But where I've got the piping, it's starting to the piping's starting to fray. It is pretty ancient though. And then which way up shall we have you? I think that way. There we are. I haven't pressed it. Is that going to annoy me that I've not pressed it? Never mind. A really quick, easy, simple fix for a cushion cover. Yay, that's now a job off my list and I can get on now with a gift to make. So thank you for hanging out with me today. Thank you for putting up with all the issues with lighting and moving around and me getting a bit harumphy about it all. Oh, one day it'll be all smooth sailing and that would just be boring, wouldn't it? I will see you again really soon, I hope. By the look of the weather out of the window, I don't think it's going to be in the garden. We'll see. I'm sure we can find some mischief to all get up to together. Until then, please look after yourselves, everyone, and happy sewing, needle and thread sewing to all of you who are just starting out with sewing machines. Have fun.